Now, Courtney is fast becoming, I think, one of the top tier go-to people for understanding technocracy, where they're going, what the overall game plan is. She put so much time and effort into really going hardcore on this stuff. So I'm looking forward to this book. I'm going to purchase it. And it's a cautionary tale, you said, because I know from reading, Patrick Wood over the years and going back, reading his Technocracy trilogy back in the day. And I'm glad that you linked up to make this book with him. Before we get into the specifics, how did this come about? And then what's the overall sort of approach that you guys took in this book? Sometimes co-author books I would think are difficult, but maybe it wasn't difficult.
It was actually super, smooth. This was a fantastic collaboration. We, gave each other deadlines and, yeah, we work really, really well together. Yeah, so I mean, I've known him for several years now, and I've been following his work, and I've had him on my show. And then I had done we started like a roundtable, Technocracy roundtable, with Aaron Day and Craig Wenkelwicks. And he asked me to host the Omnivore Symposium. And through a bunch of discussions, he had been planning to write another book. And yeah, he asked me if I would want to collaborate with him. And I was like, absolutely. I didn't really think much about it. I was super excited. And so, yeah, we started he really wanted this to be a very short book. This was actually longer, and it's still a really short book. A lot of it is the footnotes. We didn't do footnotes. We just did references because we didn't want to distract the readers. So there's Chicago style references, but actually that takes a lot of the book. So it is actually still a very short book, but not nearly as short as he wanted. His whole thought process is that he wants it to get into the hands of as many people as possible. And unfortunately, people don't really read tomes anymore today. And a tome seems to be like 250 pages. It's not really even a tome, that's just the tragedies of our time. So yeah, so he wanted, so it's written, like each chapter is a standalone essay, but of course there's a central theme. And really the concept is that the premise of MAGA, Make America Great Again, is not something I object to. I mean, that sounds great. I'm all on board with Make America Great Again. I'm all on board with MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. Who argues with that? I think, getting rid of seed oils and all the fake food and the big pharma push, that's a great. MABA is not as exciting to me, which is Make America Biotech Accelerate. And so he actually says accelerate in the name, in the acronym. So essentially, our thesis is that people who were voting for and who were caught up in this MAHA movement were thinking they were going to get some sort of a restoration, something that would bring us closer to American founding principles and get away from the direction that we've been heading towards this socialist, globalist, and really technocratic is the real end goal, at least in my opinion. And instead, what they did was kind of harness that energy and use it to, instead of reform Washington, D.C. and restore some power to we the people, they gave it all to Silicon Valley. And that's really not what most people thought they were voting for. So we wanted people to, we say it's a cautionary tale because not so much that it's a fictional kind of a story, but more that a lot of people don't know the regulatory infrastructure that is being implemented, and they don't know the technologies that are being empowered currently. And so we wanted people to be aware of that because you can't defeat a threat that you don't know exists. And, the hope is that in the process of getting this information out to people, maybe people will start to push back, because a lot of them, I think especially the MAHA crowd, are very busy cheering, right? They think they've won. Some people have kind of a deification of Trump and think he's their savior. He can do no wrong. I think the QAnon movement was partly to blame for that. Not that everybody who's MAHA is Q, not saying that, but there is definitely that kind of sentiment. It's I don't need to tell you or your audience, but sometimes it gets a little like football, team sports, and they think their team has won and they don't need to do anything. They can just sit back, trust the plan. And we wanted to let really them know. I mean, it's for everybody, and not even just Americans, because actually what you really see is this interesting dialectic. There are so many dialectics, but we were told that we were going to fight the globalists, right? That's what Trump kept saying. We're going to fight the globalists. And what he really seemed to mean by that, if you read his One Big Beautiful Bill and his AI action plan, was yeah, we're going to fight the globalists, at least, ostensibly, but we're going to build the stack that will create the infrastructure and all the technology that the globalists will use, and we'll run the technate from America. So essentially, we will be the controlling global empire. And yeah, I don't think that's what people thought they were voting for either.
Yeah, like the description of the book says that people thought, oh, we won the Cold War, communism, socialism, in the Second World War, fascism, those were all defeated. But really, what was reintroduced, as the description says, in 1973, the Trilateral Commission announced a new international economic order, which has basically the technate, or the technocracy, as you said, as its underlying ideology. And the book says the dark enlightenment then of people like Nick Land and Curtis Yarvin has this idea of returning us to a monarchy. And I want to be clear, nothing to do really with Christianity, in my view, or Orthodox Christianity, but perhaps some synthetic or simulated or technocratic version of Christianity or something. We've seen Peter Thiel recently talking about supposed Christianity lectures, or I'm not exactly sure what he thinks Christianity is, but it comes from these sort of
Doesn't sound biblical. I
yeah,
can
these
tell you
sort
that.
of allegorical, Jordan Peterson style presentations of Rene Girard's theology. So you say that, or the description says, tokenization is flipping us into an asset-based economic system, where, as Klaus noted, you will own nothing and you will be happy. So AI is rolling out. We know that there is this massive push that Trump talked about with Larry Ellison and others to have this gigantic, future zillion-dollar AI infrastructure that they're going to roll out. And this is the problem: is that people think, well, because Trump has some good ideas, like maybe he's going to Christianize the technocracy. So why don't you start by telling us what's the problem with the idea that, well, why can't we just have a Christian version of technocracy? I mean, I'm going to answer with my critiques, but I want to hear what you and Patrick Wood think is the problem with this idea.
Well, we do have a whole chapter in the book on the rise of state religion and this movement that is co-opting. I call it Christianese. So they speak in Christian sounding language, but it's not biblically rooted at all. And there are a couple of different factions of this. They're not all the same, but they're steering towards the same place. They have this shared telos, and they're oftentimes working hand in hand. They scratch each other's back when it's conducive to their end goals. But we've got like the NAR movement, which is the New Apostolic Reformation, and they believe in the Seven Mountain Mandate. And this is really influential on the Trump administration. This is actually a huge part, I think, of what's going on with the turning point. I think it was always the plan, but I certainly think now that's in full force. And some of them even say that Charlie was an apostle.
Oh, interesting.
Uh,
Now, I don't mean to cut you off, but could you help me understand what this is new to me? What is this, the Seven Mountain Mandate? What is that?
So the Seven Mountain Mandates is this idea that they believe that there are the seven pillars of society, and I'm probably not going to remember all of them, but it's like the long march through the institutions. It's the same kind of idea, like the legal, education, media,
So
entertainment.
all areas of society, basically, that's the mountains.
Yes. So they believe that they need to take over all those areas, and then they will bring about the Antichrist. They can bring, yeah, it's all about everything is, it's all the same language about the end times and the Antichrist that Thiel talks about. What Peter
Well,
Thiel talks
well,
about in
surely
his
they're not going to openly say they're bringing about Antichrist. What do you mean? Like, so this is like evangelical dominion mandate theology? Is that what
yeah,
you're
that's
saying?
exactly what it is. Yeah, it's exactly. So they believe they need to, have dominion over all of these spheres, and so they can bring heaven on earth. Right? That's their whole premise. But yeah, Peter Thiel actually says that in his Act 17 lectures, I think there were 4 lectures. They were each 2 hours long. But the main takeaway is that anybody who puts any restraints on AI is the Antichrist. That's the Antichrist. So I guess
Wait,
Trump isn't.
so the point of his lectures was actually that putting restraint on AI is somehow antichrist, but what, like, did you get this, like, how does he come I mean, I don't believe that, but I'm saying, like, how could you even argue that? Like, how did he come to that conclusion? Like, what is the line of argument there? I don't get it.
So it's an Antichrist and Armageddon, and he thinks the other alternative is that we're going to have this globalization. It's going to be like the Greta Thunberg is like the Antichrist, the other Antichrist. She's going to
Yeah, I
bring us
remember
down.
him saying that. Oh, so he's saying we've all got a race to control AI, and if we don't get a Christian version of it, they will win, and it will be a collectivist Greta AI. Is that what he's saying?
He doesn't say that's going to be AI, Greta, because he says that they're against AI, which is actually not true. It doesn't even make sense.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense because if you actually look at what the environmentalists are doing, they're advancing AI
Yeah,
all under
exactly.
green. But the difference is they're much more clever with their marketing. They're a little bit more deceptive. I just put out an article on Homo autocatalyticus versus Homo amor.
Yeah, I've got this pulled up. Yeah.
Okay, and they love to make up their own language, just for people reading things that I know you and your audience are familiar, but like it's not that complicated. It's like reading Heidegger. I know he wrote in German. We're reading the translation, but he made up all of his own words to make things sound way more
Yeah, this
complicated,
is
right?
a classic trick of philosophers, especially ones that get really kind of big and full of themselves. You create neologisms because then it sounds very, sophisticated, and oh, you don't understand, Heidegger's sense of Dasein. You know what I mean? Like so you have to go learn this new language almost. But that's a kind
Well,
of
it also
that's a classic
distracts.
philosophical sort of dork trick.
Yes, as Nietzsche said, they muddy the waters to make it seem deep. I think he was
Yeah,
projecting there. Yeah.
exactly.
So it's also a great distraction. You're so busy trying to learn this new language that you're not actually confronting the material. I just say that because like Homo amor and Homo autocatalyticus sounds very fancy, but really, both of them are paths towards posthumanism. Not even transhumanism; it's posthumanism. And Nick Land really embraced. He's the one who came up with Homo autocatalyticus, which he actually didn't come up with. It was John H. Campbell, who is a chemist. It's like a concept from chemistry, but he adopted this into machine technology and AI and recursive type of machine processes. But anyway, I bring it up just because the Homo amor, it comes out of David Temple. And these are the environmentalists. They're the Gaia worshippers. And David Temple is a pseudonym for Zach Stein, who was just inducted to the Club of Rome last year. Daniel Schmachtenberger, who I've talked to you about before. He's a Game B proponent. He's also he's like a co-founder of what was Neurohacker Collective. It's now called Qualia Life, right? And then the Consilience Project also. And then, of course, Kenneth Wilber, who I am sure you're familiar with, integral theory and all of that. But anyway, they make up David Temple, and I always get a kick out of it because the reason they picked David Temple was because they didn't want it to be egoistic. And meanwhile, they have this whole concept of anthro-ontology where they literally rewrite the story of the universe and they think they co-create with God, but that's not hubristic at all. Thank goodness they decided to have one pseudonym so they, obliterate any ego. Um, but anyway, in that they're much more deceptive. They talk about how, we have to be very cautious about AI. We have to be very cautious about techno-feudal system. But what are they doing? They're actually fomenting it. They're creating it. And they're just doing it under the guise of love and light and, creating collective intelligence that's all geared towards it's a noosphere, but it's a radical love affair with the universe. So it sounds very poetic and beautiful. Whereas the Dark Enlightenment, they're much more,
So it's just a,
blunt.
a Coomer Gooner universe versus like Terminator universe.
Yes, exactly. So they have, but the Dark Enlightenment, they're, pretty blunt. They let you know, and that's what I see happening really with like Trump, and they claim that and what Peter Thiel is talking about, like, so that the Greta Thunberg isn't really against technocracy. They just claim that they are. They're much more, cloaked about it. So yeah, but that's what he's saying. He's saying that anybody puts any restraints, that's the Antichrist, is the curtailing of AI. Because remember, he says that the biggest problem we face today is that since the 70s, we've been in a time of stagnation. And so this lack of progress is our big problem. This is, the devastation of humanity, is the stagnation. And so we can't restrain AI because now we're just, accentuating this stagnation. And so that's really the Antichrist that we need to worry about. And it looks like, there is that whole Constance Cumby would always tell me that Trump was the Antichrist. And, at the time I kind of was like, okay, she sent me home with 10 books and she said, these are required reading. They're all on Trump being the Antichrist. So when you're done, I've got 10 more for you on Trump being the Antichrist. And my husband and I kind of looked at each other, like, kind of chuckled a little bit. And we heard him talk recently about, the Middle East, and he keeps talking about peace. I mean, not that he's not fomenting war, but he's saying peace and all this rhetoric. And we looked at each other like, maybe he is the Antichrist. I don't know. I am not saying he is, but I do think that he's trying to prove that he's not by aligning with Peter Thiel, and he's ensuring that there is no restraint of artificial intelligence. And that's what his AI action plan is all about. That's what the one big beautiful bill is all about. And
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not aligned with Musk, but he's right that it is, it's a monstrosity. It's also what Senator Ted Cruz, I wrote an article about this too. His Sandbox Act is just to bolster and enhance the deregulation of the AI action plan.
Yeah, I noticed too in the description of the book, it mentions the tokenization aspect. This is fascinating too from a crypto perspective because, I follow crypto pretty closely and intently, and I keep up with all the different niches. And within the crypto world, one of the rising emerging markets is RWAs, which is real world assets. And so they're trying to, with various blockchains and networks, tokenize all of reality.
Yep.
And they want to see, for example, Solana wants to corner the market on tokenizing stocks. Ripple's supposed to tokenize and transform the Swift payment network. I don't think, I think, especially Ripple's obviously like a centralized scam in my view. But I think there is a danger in this, the potentiality of this, because if you remember in the third section of Klaus's book, Fourth Industrial Revolution, he actually discusses this, the tokenization of everything and everything through the Internet of Things then being tracked and traced. So tokenization is a type of a scam where everything will be tracked and traced under the guise of emerging markets and all this stuff. So I think a lot of, and even people in the last week have been discussing the possibility that AI actually might be a giant bubble, much like the .com bubble was an early on bubble. Not that there won't be, real technocratic challenges in companies and all this, but I think Sam Altman was like begging for money because they have these projected plans of like trillions of dollars of what they're going to do, but they actually only have a few $billions like actually in the company. So it's like people are starting to think that AI might be a bubble. And just like, the .com, when it popped, it's not that the internet was wrong or bad, or like it's not a failed venture. It's just that there's a giant explosive narrative that builds around the markets, but the tech and the people are not yet ready for where it's at. So then that bubble pops. So even if the AI bubble pops, that doesn't mean like, oh, AI isn't real, it's not a real threat. It just means that there's a giant scam market built around it, and then they will continue forward in the next 20 years with moving it towards whatever they're trying to make it into, which is the global brain, which is all the transhumanist stuff. So anyway, long story short is that I don't believe that Bitcoin is not part of that idea of tokenizing all of reality and some tracking tracing networks. So I'm still a big proponent of Bitcoin as a a real legitimate currency of the future. But the other challenges, the other networks and blockchains are explicitly centralized ideas about tracking and tracing real world assets. And if you look up like various crypto markets, if you go to CoinMarketCap, you can check under the different niches. One of them is RWA, and that's exactly what we're talking about. What's the danger with tokenizing all areas of life?
So there's a lot of danger. As you said, it can be tracked, traced, surveilled, programmed, pre-programmed. I don't know. I don't want to say too much on here, but if you're familiar with biodigital convergence, if you've seen Black Mirror, there is an article. People can look it up. It's several years old now from University of Massachusetts Amherst. And they talk about harnessing using humans essentially like an antenna with 6G. So people can look into that research. I won't expound on that too much for here, but so when you get into that kind of stuff, I mean, that's talking about literally remote control interface, completely programming humans. But beyond that, you don't even need that to get to where it could be very concerning. And you have a complete social credit system. They talk about the UBI, universal basic income, but of course it won't be that. It'll be Elon Musk is saying it's going to be a higher basic income, which is that's not going to be the case. Maybe for certain people, but that's not going to be the case. What it is going to be is a conditionally based income, which is essentially social credit. But you hear people like Larry Fink, right, who has been calling the shots for a
In
very
other
long
words,
time.
you said the word wigger. You are docked this week's paycheck because you don't get your UBI credits because the refrigerator heard you say wigger.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's right. You can't do that. And the refrigerator is watching. They
Yeah,
already
right.
have it, like the ones with the big screens in the front and
No, they're
so
actually like I saw a refrigerator that was they're already like planning out like it will track the
your carbon
groceries that
emissions.
are missing and then go ahead and order you like what's missing in the refrigerator.
Yes, and I think this is just stepping stone to like carbon emission, carbon usage and credits and that sort of thing, which is straight out of Technocracy Inc. Right? They called it energy credits. I actually got a copy of the Technocracy study course.
Oh,
Uh,
nice. That's
Hubert.
awesome.
Yeah, I was super excited about it. It was like the one copy I could find, and it wasn't crazy expensive. So, but yeah, so they with the tokenization. So Larry Fink, who has been calling the shots for a really long time, but now he's officially the co-chair of the World Economic Forum. So if anybody had
Yeah,
any
so
doubt,
BlackRock, now World Economic Forum, exactly.
exactly. And he has written extensively about tokenization. I mean, Besant talks about it a lot too. And they almost look like they're salivating. They're like dogs about to be fed. I mean, when they talk about this sort of thing, they're so excited. And if you remember when they were trying to, I was screaming about this last year when they were trying to put a new category up on the New York Stock Exchange, the natural asset companies. And well, yeah,
Yeah, I
so
remember you
that
talking about that, yeah.
yeah, so we fortunately enough people sent in comments and they actually did rescind the proposal. That does not mean that this fight is over. They just keep rebranding, they march forward. It's actually called the Sustains Act here in the United States now. I mean, they're definitely still marching ahead. They think they're going to make upwards of 500 quadrillion dollars on this big scam. So I don't think they're leaving that on the table. I don't know how you even quantify 500 quadrillion dollars. It's like a made up number at that point. But it's a similar kind of idea. They're not just talking about tokenizing the
Well,
economy.
maybe if they destroy the dollar through money printing and $1 ends up being the equivalent of a quadrillion dollars because of the, like when the Ugandan currency or the Zimbabwe
Yeah.
currency collapses and like a loaf of bread costs a billion Zimbabwe dollars. Maybe that's how they get to 500 quadrillion, which ends up being like, I don't know, like 5 million or 5 billion in today's current. I'm being silly, but you get the point I'm saying.
Yeah. In that case, maybe. But they're not letting it go. They think they're going to be, very, very wealthy off, and they'll have control over all the Earth's resources, which is the plan, right? Biden called it America the Beautiful, which is really just the 30 by 30 land grab, but that doesn't sound great, so they have to rename it. But that's only a stepping stone to the half Earth agenda, which E.O. Wilson wrote the book on, right? So that's the idea that half of the Earth lands and waters are going to be uninhabitable and untouchable by
Yes. In fact, I'm glad you mentioned that because I have one of his books and I've been meaning to get to that in the Global Elite book series, and I just haven't done it yet because we got so kind of distracted with Changing Images of Man. And you know, Alex was so like, come in studio, come studio, talk about Changing Images of Man. Come down here right now, bring the book.
I can't believe he said that he wasn't familiar with it.
I think that he forgot that because people in the comments were saying, Alex, you mentioned this book in the past, so like I think you just didn't remember like which text this was because it's so hard. I mean, everybody can get the PDF, but it's just really hard to get a hold of that book. Now you mentioned Black Mirror, and I want to just really quickly plug that. Guess what? Esoteric Hollywood 3 has an entire 40-page section, I think, of me covering every episode of the first 3 seasons. So if you are interested in predictive dystopian literature, of course, Courtney's book that's just out in the show description and in the chat, also available at technocracy.news, Patrick Wood's website. It deals with dystopian warnings, but I covered it, as you guys know, from the fiction film perspective. So I did cover all of the pretty wild elements in Black Mirror, which I think we're going on almost maybe 10 years from when Black Mirror first came out. I think season 1 was really good, and they kind of get progressively worse as the seasons go on. But you guys will remember there is that very predictive episode where I want to say, is it White Bear or Be Right Back? No, it's White Bear, I think, where you're I can't remember the name of the episode, but it's the one where the guy has to like ride the exercise bike to
ride the bikes. Yeah,
exactly. That's like tokenization of everything.
Exactly. That's exactly the one I was thinking of. Exactly. And they have studies on that. They say it's not very efficient right now, but they do have studies on powering and crypto mining.
Yeah.
So
also remember, I forgot, there's also that really good episode in, I think, season 3 with Ron Howard's daughter, Bryce Dallas Howard, where everybody's controlled by social media. And if you eventually, have you seen that one?
I don't think I've seen that one.
Oh, this is one of the best. You got to watch this one. It's actually as good as the first season episodes, even though it's not really, the season 3 is not that great. But Nosedive is a dystopian suburbia controlled by social media. So basically your class in society is determined by your social credit score. And if you go against society, not only do you eventually get shadow banned in reality, you can actually be put in like prison. So they imprison people for their Facebook posts and that kind of stuff. So that one's really good. But
UK.
Exactly right. People in the UK are literally being taken to prison for criticizing Islamic invasion, criticizing Fabian socialism. So notice the pattern here, guys. And this is something that Courtney has talked about for a long time too. You know, the Fabian socialist technocratic model is absolutely real. The UK, Australia, Canada, they're all part of that UK British Imperial Commonwealth, which is now openly Fabian socialist. It's not accidental that they're the ones that are imprisoning you for your, Facebook posts or whatever. That's the model for the future.
Yes. And it's also that model for that, like this Fabian social ethics. So in that article that I wrote on the Homo Amor and the Homo Autocatalyticus, I talk about how the cosmoerotic humanists are basically using that Fabian socialist ethics blueprint to kind of, soft power influence to condition you into their ethics. Not that we don't want morality and ethics, but it's who's deciding that ethics. It's like the Ben Goertzel.
It's Ben Goertzel's. Yeah, we're all just made of like determined molecules, man. We're all just molecules determined by reality. Like Ben Goertzel's like the ultimate sort of, DMT bro, transhumanist, materialist guy. And also Klaus's later book, the one, I think it was not Industrial Revolution, but the one about the Great Reset. Like that book, he talks about we need a new ethic for the world. The world needs a new covenant, a new ethic. And the new
Yep.
covenant, the new ethic, which is weird because it's like biblical terminology again, is
Yep.
actually this technocratic ethic, this scarce resources, austerity, green agenda ethic.
Yes. And so Wilson is a huge influence on, I mean, on the Game Bee wiki, it's like E.O. Wilson over and over again. They're really influenced by him. And of course, he's an evolutionary biologist. A lot of them are. And it's all predicated on Malthusianism. So, um, but yeah, so the tokenization is really concerning because a lot of people will argue, well, we're kind of already in a tracked, surveilled, to some extent programmed monetary system, which to some extent is true. I don't deny that. Certainly with the credit cards, I mean, MasterCard and Visa both have like the carbon tracking, and
Yes.
now MasterCard was the first to do their black card where you can opt in and get your, you know, carbon ratings, and so you can opt into your own tyranny if that's your thing. But so we have that to some extent, but the big difference with the tokenization is, one, like the natural asset companies, that's the resources, like tangible resources, but they want to tokenize and commodify. But now they're talking about, it's not just economics and like tangible assets, they want to tokenize everything. So like the healthcare system, the education system, I mean, everything will be tokenized. And this means, like, as you said, you'll own nothing and be happy. I'm not so sure about the be happy part unless we come to love our servitude in Huxley's Brave New World.
Yeah,
Maybe
exactly.
in that case, if we all take our soma, maybe we'll be happy about it. But we are going to be owning nothing. And while we're very close to that right now, I mean, if you use real estate, it's a really good tangible example for people. If you think about real estate in this country, we pay property taxes. So you essentially lease your property from the
Right.
government. You don't really own it,
Which is
because if you
already like theft. Yeah.
yeah, like if you default on it, they seize your property. But and if you have a mortgage, obviously, that's the death trap, and you're paying into it. But here's the thing: you still have equity, and so like most of this country is predicated on small business. And what do a lot of people use to start a small business? They leverage the equity from their home to start these businesses. When you go to a tokenized economy, now that's not saying tokenization has to work this way, but this is what they're presenting, is where the banks are going to own the assets. BlackRock's going to own the assets. You're not going to own the assets. You're
Yeah,
basically
this is
going
the circular
yeah,
economy where you rent your, everything. You're going to rent your underwear, share it between the neighborhood. You rent, I mean, I understand people thought, oh, Uber is a great idea, but that was actually preparing the way for, you don't need a car. There's no reason for you to have a car. The only people who will have cars, as Harman, I think, wrote in that 1981 or two Millennium paper, it's like, no, there will be essential and non-essential workers, and the only people who need cars will be essential workers.
yep, that's it. It's totally conditioning. And so when you think about that, then people can't, they don't have equity. They can't use that as leverage to start a business. I mean, that's, I think, a really concrete way to think about what this shift does, where people really you don't own anything. You have no assets. And they have complete control. And when you think about the biodigital convergence aspect of it, I mean, to me, that's just transhumanism. And technocracy all wrapped in a very dystopian mix.
Yeah, I think this is the biggest, one of the biggest, failures with the promises of Trump was that, like you said, fighting globalization, and then it's like just seems to be fully on board with all the technocratic stuff. And when he was talking at the Bitcoin conference, it was like it was a lot of stuff that sounded good, right? It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like, never sell your Bitcoin, don't sell your Bitcoin, probably never sell your Bitcoin. Bright future, gonna be a wonderful future. And then it's like, now we're gonna tokenize all of reality. Now we're gonna have AI tracking, tracing everything. So, I mean, the there's many places to criticize Trump. This is definitely, I think, one of them. And it's funny that you mentioned this model of like they own everything. If you go back maybe 15 years, John Perkins wrote that book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, and he talked about how his job as part of a corporate CIA vulture was to go in and kind of prepare third world countries for the neoliberal sort of takeover where the corporations come in and they basically own everything. And this is like a global version of that. So what the CIA and the corporations would do back then that John Perkins wrote about is like this now global BlackRock World Economic Forum plan where all reality, all assets, all water is tokenized and measured and controlled. That's what Klaus wrote about in the third section of Fourth Industrial Revolution. There's a movie I recommend everybody watch. It's pretty good. I had not seen it for some reason. I didn't even know about it. But Owen Wilson is in a 2012 movie with Pierce Brosnan, and it's about Owen Wilson moving to, I think it's Thailand or some country in Southeast Asia, and he gets there under the guise of being a corporate just engineer, but it turns out his corporation is actually trying to buy the water for like an entire region. So they're going to control all the water, and there's a political revolution because the people are mad at the corporation for it. Long story short, he meets with Pierce Brosnan in the midst of all this chaos and political revolution. And Pierce Brosnan is British intelligence. He says basically, my job is to be a corporate economic vulture. We come in, we prepare the country for political revolution so that the corporation can come in and basically own the water. So, point being, when you see Mamdani elected in New York, when you see revolutions, color revolutions, when you see Fabian socialism in the UK and in Canada, this is not actually for socialism in the long term. It is technocracy in the long term so that BlackRock and all of the World Economic Forum goobers can own everything and then let you rent it. Socialism is the necessary pathway to get to that final stage. And it is not going to be, like Courtney said, where you're actually owning nothing and being happy. It's slavery.
It's slavery. It's total slavery, and of the most insidious and pernicious kind. I mean, I don't want to undermine the atrocities of communism and fascism. They're terrible, but they're nothing compared to technocracy. And I don't think people can even conceive of how dystopian technocracy really is. They haven't experienced it. Trump just did the anti-communism week. It's this week. And I tweeted out, I was like, good, maybe next week we'll do anti-technocracy week. I won't hold my breath. And then I wrote under that and I said, the Cold War call, they want their playbook back. But
Yeah, exactly. I mean, have you seen that? It's a great German film. It's a kind of an independent film. It's called Das Leben der Anderen, The Lives of Others.
oh, such a good film.
And if you watch it and pay attention and you think about, I think you and I've even talked about this, so forgive me for repeating myself, but you're watching this 80s era Cold War thing play out in East Germany. And, the guy has a eventually kind of a change of conscience, the sort of the Stasi guy who's tracking and tracing and spying on these people with all this old, 80s era Soviet technology, East German tech, low tech stuff. And then he realizes like his whole job is to basically just make people miserable, and he's miserable. And then he kind of begins to question at the end, and he ends up, well, I'm not going to spoil the movie if you've never seen it. It's really good, but that is a microcosm, the Stasi approach to what you actually get in terms of the technocratic BlackRock Klaus future. Like that's a global version of this microcosm of the East German Stasi surveilling and controlling and tracking and tracing this couple in the movie. So people need to really understand that that's the real long-term danger here, is going into that kind of a world. And people that have kids, especially, like, you want your kids to grow up in a world where the words that you say are the refrigerator is gonna fine you for what you say. It's just insane.
It's insane. It's yeah, that was a really great movie. I love that movie. Um, I was going to say about the water. I can't remember if I saw that movie, but it's basically what Nestle did, right? And I feel like Nestle was kind of like a
Yeah, they probably were basing that movie, yeah, on like what corporate plans were going to be. And if you saw the second Daniel Craig Bond film, Quantum of Solace, is the same plot where the Spectre corporate elites are trying to take over the water in Tanzania or some weird region where they discovered like underwater aquifers, and they basically just want to control the entire country for the water. they think originally they think it's over oil, and then there's like this. Well, wait a minute, there's no oil here. Well, and then the villain says, "Don't you understand, Mister Bond? We work with the fascists, we work with the communists, we work with whoever, so that we can contain. It's basically what Klaus would say, right? It's like they don't care about the
Yeah.
ideology; it's about control at the end of the day and owning the natural resources in total.
Yeah, that's the whole plan, and that was the Trilateral Commission's agenda to create the new economic international world order, and a lot of them were technocrats. So I mean,
Exactly.
we're just seeing the advancement of that now.
All right. Well, we've got a few super chats. And guys, if you want to ask Courtney any questions, she's written some really great, really in depth articles getting deep into Teal, Nick Land, all this kind of stuff. And it's funny because Jamie was reading through the Nick Land book, and she's asking me all these philosophical questions because it's kind of her first philosophy book, and it's a bit of reverse because I've not read this book. Jamie's reading a philosophy book that I haven't read. So we're going to do a podcast where Jamie's read the philosophy and I haven't, and then we're going to see how that information or how that podcast transpires. But if you want to ask Courtney a question, I put Courtney's Substack in the chat. What's up? What were we going to say?
Oh, I was just saying that. Have fun. That'll be awesome. I look forward to watching that.
Maximus P says for $10, I disagree with nothing. Orthodoxy is true. Bernstein 3040. $5. Jay, love your work. Thank you so much, man. Bird, $3. This is a very interesting conversation. Thank you, Bird. Courtney does a lot of really excellent work, and we've been friends for 5 years. I think 20. I met you in 2020. So Courtney and her husband are very good people. We know them in real life. It's not just fake internet relationships. They're great people. J Mel, $10. How stupid is Nick Land's decimal numogram as an oracle? Is there a danger of this coding it into AI? I'll let Courtney answer that. So the question is, what is this decimal numogram? Is it an oracle, and is it a danger for being coded into AI?
Well, I don't know about the danger of it, because I think the danger depends on who's programming it, who's programming the code, and what is their worldview, what is their intention, what do they want the outcome. I mean, codes are just magnifying whatever the input is. So if Nick Land is doing it, then I think it's probably pretty dangerous. I mean, he is embracing a post-human world. He warns us that there's actually a section in one of his books where he says, like, no human gets out alive. And this is not a warning. He's embracing this. He's saying that the post-human world is much like Peter Thiel talks about. This is progress. This is, where we need to go for our next stage of evolution. So if he's programming it, I'd be a little bit concerned. I know there was some discussion that it's based on like Kabbalah. It's very similar to like the tree of life. But again, all of the roots of it are kind of irrelevant. It's really about who's in terms of the danger. The danger is who's programming the AI and why. So.
JML, $5. It is shocking how Theosophy undergirds most of the evil systems today. Will you take it as a topic? If you have time, this is a request. He's asked for a future podcast on Theosophy. Sure. Yeah. I think if you go back to one of my podcasts a while back, I did cover Theosophy in some degree of depth, but maybe we need to just do one specific. I know I've done Alice Bailey and I've done Theosophy, but maybe we need to just do specifically a lengthy one on Theosophy. But Courtney, would you give us kind of your assessment of the basics of Theosophy? And I mean, Theosophy actually comes up quite a bit in Changing Images of Man. And, for the people who only think that everything is Jewish or only Jewish controlled, no, actually Changing Images of Man is explicit that anything to do with the deity in the Torah, the deity of Judaism, the deity of Christianity, that all has to be wiped away. And they say something more akin to Theosophy in the future is a better approach. So it's not only an all Jewish running everything. I disagree with political Zionism and rabbinic philosophy and theology, but it's not Jewish people that are the world's source of all problems. And a significant portion of the technocratic socialist elite are not Jewish and are part of the problem.
I know somebody tried to tell me that Peter Thiel was Jewish. I'm like, are you like living under a rock?
Well,
Like,
I get told every day I'm Jewish, so.
Yeah.
Apparently, everyone is actually Jewish. We just didn't even know it.
They just the only game they ever learned playing to play growing up was Pin the Tail on the Donkey, and they realized it's the Jews, and so you just blame them for everything, and all the world's problems go away. You just get rid of them. That's the answer. Yeah, life is not quite that simple. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. So theosophy, yeah, I've covered this quite extensively, and I actually think theosophy is very instrumental in this technocratic agenda. I think it's kind of underpinning a lot of it. And when you talk about the Jews and it not being compatible with theosophy, Alice Bailey, actually, section 4 in her externalization of the hierarchy, she talks about the plan, right? The big plan. And the first order of operations is to eradicate the Jews. And she says that the biggest problem, I mean, both Blavatsky and Bailey are very opposed to Christianity as well. They welcome the mystical variants of all these religions. So, the Kabbalistic with the C as well as Kabbalistic with the K or the Q, all of those are very welcome. The syncretic variants of these religions. So, something like a NARS or even some of these more like Christian nationalist movements, they might welcome because they're not biblically rooted. The big issue that they have, this is the chart from Changing Images Man.
Yeah, I just want to
The
show that this chart. I don't mean to cut you off, just to point out that like you can see they're pulling from Theosophy and they're
a
talking
little
about
dark,
yeah
yeah.
it says perennialism, Theosophy, and the religion of the future has to absolutely discard anything to do with Christianity, the Bible, etc.
Yes, and so what they both Bailey and Blavatsky say is that it's because of the separateness, and particularly with Jews, right? So Christians as well, but they particularly the Jews are the first that needs to be eradicated because of their separateness. And when you think about it, it's a monistic type of belief system. Madame Blavatsky talks about how it's essentially it's perennialism, right? It's the philosophy of perennialism. So it's the all the religions and philosophies of the world. It's not a religion, it's a philosophy, and they're all welcome. And you see this in the World Parliament of Religions. You see this in even the what is it, the Budapest one, right? The Club Budapest, and they've all these variants ones, but they're essentially different iterations of the World Parliament of Religions that accepts all. They even accept ayahuasca religion, right? They're all welcome, but except for the monotheistic religion. They even don't like a traditional Islamic religion because it's a monotheistic. And so in their view, those have to go because they're trying to create a one world religion. So they want like a soup, a theosophical soup of all of the. And honestly, I may not align with some of the religions they choose, but if I were a Hindu or a Buddhist, I would actually be offended by their variation, because what they do is they just cherry pick. They cherry
Yeah,
pick the elements that they like that are conducive to creating this syncretic one world type of belief
absolutely.
system. And the reason they can't have any separateness is because any individuality could create some sort of dissent. There has to be unity. So the Theosophists talk about source. We all come from source. It's not God. This is why they worship the Gaia, Earth, right? So they worship the creation, not the creator. And they believe that the whole journey of humanity is to return back to source. It is, it's very akin to the Gnostic inversion, where they believe they keep talking about co-creation. And I've talked about this. Changing Images Man certainly talks about this. And Changing Images Man is very much an extension of cosmic humanism, Oliver Reiser. His work, certainly Buckminster Fuller as well, Spaceship Earth. And then we've got this first principles and first values of evolving perennialism. What does it say? I can't see it.
It's Huxley's book, Perennial
Oh,
Philosophy, which comes up,
yeah.
it's cited multiple times in Changing Images of Man. But I wanted to point out that when I did my analysis of Doctor Strange, I mean, the whole movie is premised on the very thing that we're talking about. It's basically Theosophy. Um,
Yeah.
and you have to understand that like it's more nuanced than just saying, oh, is it Jews or not, right? And even my chat is like, it's Jews, it's Jews, it's Jews. The Jews are not the source of all the world's problems. Like that's just simply not true. But I can be critical of rabbinic philosophy, Zionism, etc., political, Judaism and whatnot, without thinking that people's problems are inherently genetic or of their, descent or something like that. I don't believe that, and I've consistently had the same perspective for a long time. So I don't know, people,
Yeah.
the chat's all trying to figure out who's a Fed, but this, anytime these topics come up, that's all that ends up happening is like, you're a Fed, you're all Feds, you're all, okay, yes, we're all Feds.
Yeah.
Now let's move on to
I
actual
really just
argumentation.
to close that off, I just want to say that now we've got the first principles, first values of evolving perennialism, 42 propositions on cosmoerotic humanism. And that's David Temple. And this is an extension of the Changing Images of Man document. And this is laying the groundwork for a post-human future. But it's the difference between someone like Nick Land, who is saying that, we're just going to create the technology and then the technology is going to take care of the rest and take care of the post-human world for us through recursively programmed algorithms. The difference here is that it's saying we have to co-create. And so we have to adopt this philosophy so that we can become one. We can become one with God, not in a religious sense, but like in a theosophical sense. We're going to return to source. We're all going to be one. There's no distinction. We'll become subsumed into the noosphere. They have different terms because they always rebrand. Like some of them call it collective intelligence. They'll give it different names, but it's still this noosphere concept where you will not have individuality. You will not have. They of course use words like unique. They're trying to use veilcraft to lure you in. So they use the buzzwords that they think will resonate with people. But what they're really saying is that they are embracing this noosphere concept where we're all subsumed. And this is Theosophy. And now they're just saying we need to embrace the technology that will advance this. So, yeah. And sorry, one more thing. I would say
Yeah.
I call it technological immunization of the eschaton. And this is a very theosophical concept. So I think that, I know you and your audience are probably familiar with the idea of immunization of the eschaton, but it's, bringing heaven here on earth. It's a political concept. And I put technological in front of it because I think that's exactly what they're doing. They're trying, they now assume the role of God, right? They arrogate themselves to godlike status where they become the architects of reality. But of course, they can't actually bring heaven on earth. So they're creating a simulacra. And so it's got the essence of earth, but it's all a fake. And they think this is going to be a utopia. But of course, utopia means nowhere. And I think it's going to be a dystopian hellscape. But yeah.
Excellent. And the book is in the show description. It's also in the chat. You can get a copy of Courtney's book. You can also get it at Technocracy News, which is Patrick Wood's site. Brad Grundy, $20. Hey, I talked to you in Florida at the book signing. I want to say thank you for walking through some of the orthodox religious concepts. I agree with Courtney that technocracy is where we're headed. God bless. Thank you, Brad. Appreciate that. Courtney, thank you for coming on. Oh, wait, we got some more here. Let's see. Dr. Chungo, Alex, JB, Cody all became members. Yeah, be sure and check out Courtney's Substack. Even if you disagree, we can still learn from her voluminous tomes that she writes. So go check out her Substack. It's good information. Everybody needs to, let's just admit that everybody is a Fed. We are all Feds. All of us. Everybody is a double, triple, quadruple agent. So wait a minute. If we're quadruple agents, we're actually just back on the same original team that we were on. So no, or triple or quadruple. I don't know. Sextuple agents. We're all sextuplet agents. Courtney, thank you for coming on, guys. We're not going anywhere. Be sure and follow her also on X. I've got her information linked. Thank you for coming on, and I look forward to chatting about Esther Hollywood 3 with you soon if we can do that.
Yes. Yeah, I think we have it planned for December. So looking forward to it.